أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
Expeditions from the time of the Holy Prophet ﷺ are being discussed. In this context, the first expedition I'm going to mention today is the expedition of Qurs bin Jabir. This expedition took place in Shawwal in the 6th year after Hijrah, heading towards the people of Urayna. Some believe that this was the expedition of Sayyid bin Zayd. However, the majority have said that this was the expedition of Qurs bin Jabir. One tradition states that this was the expedition of Jarir bin Abdullah. However, this tradition has been rebutted as well. Jarir bin Abdullah accepted Islam 4 years after this expedition. The cause of this expedition was that some individuals came to the Holy Prophet ﷺ. In Bukhari, under the book of Jihad and the book of Diyat, blood money, it's related by Hazrat Anas that these 8 individuals belonged to the tribes of Ukul and Urayna. According to Ibn Jarir and Abu Awana, 4 belonged to Urayna and 3 belonged to Ukul, whereas the 8th did not belong to either of the tribes. His family background is unknown. They came to the Holy Prophet ﷺ and conversed about Islam. In another narration, it is recorded that they accepted Islam and that they were ill. Abu Awana has related that they were very weak, rather yellow in complexion, and that their stomach was very big. They said, "O Messenger of Allah ﷺ, grant us protection and give us food." As such, they were accommodated in an enclosure of Masjid Nabawi, the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ. When they recovered, the climate of Medina did not suit their body. That is, they recovered from their ailments and fatigue due to their thirst and hunger. However, in general terms, the climate of Medina did not suit them. According to Ibn Ishaq, they did not find the climate of Medina to be suitable and became weak. Although they recovered from one aspect, since their weakness was related to hunger, they fell ill to other ailments. In any case, in one tradition, it is stated that at that time, an illness broke out in Medina, known as Barsam. Barsam is an illness which affects the brain and causes swelling on the head and the chest. They said, "This disease has already reached here, and the climate of Medina does not suit us. We are livestock owners, not farmers. Kindly provide us with milk." Upon this, the Holy Prophet ﷺ said that, "I do not have anything else. However, you may go to the she-camels," and thus sent them to the pasture. In one narration, it is recorded that the Holy Prophet ﷺ sent them to the pasture of Fayfa al-Khubar. Fayfa al-Khubar is a barren area near Medina. In any case, from this narration, it appears that they did not stay long in Medina, but left rather quickly, and their health improved after drinking the milk of the she-camels. In another narration, it is recorded that the Holy Prophet ﷺ permitted them to go to the camels that had been allocated for charity, so that they may drink their milk. As such, they went to these camels and drank their milk. When they recovered, and their bodies returned to their normal state, and their stomachs reduced in size, they reverted from Islam and drove those she-camels away. On one hand, we have the kind treatment of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and on the other side, we have their behavior of recovering and then being deceitful. It is related that the freed slave of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, Yasar, and some of his comrades found them. They drove these she-camels away after reverting and took these camels with them. In any case, the Muslims challenged them and they fought them head on. The disbelievers also fought them back. They severed the hands and feet of Yasar and pierced thorns into his tongues and eyes until he died. These people who had come and stolen the she-camels, they fought the Muslim keepers as well and killed them. They then turned to the shepherd and first killed Yasar and then killed the other shepherds as well. One individual came to the Holy Prophet ﷺ and said, "They have killed my comrades." One of them survived. He came to the Holy Prophet ﷺ and said that they had taken the she-camels. It is narrated by Muhammad bin Umar that a woman from the Banu Amr bin Auf, riding her donkey, came to a certain place and passed by Yasar, who was laying under a tree. When she passed by him, he had already passed away. She returned to her people and informed them about the incident. Thus her people also came and they carried Yasar in his deceased state and brought him toward Quba. There is a narration in Sahih Muslim that some young men from the Ansar were present with the Holy Prophet ﷺ and he sent them. In one narration, it is mentioned that the Holy Prophet ﷺ sent 20 horsemen to follow their tracks, meaning that after they had left and the news reached him, he sent people behind them to apprehend them. Some of their names have also been recorded, including Salma bin Aqwa, Abu Ruhum, Abu Dar Ghafari, Buraida bin Husayb, Rafi bin Makis, his brother Jundub, Bilal bin Harith, Abdullah bin Amr bin Auf Mawzani, Jawal bin Suraka Salbi, and Suwaid bin Sakhr Juhni. All of these individuals were from the Muhajirin, and the Holy Prophet ﷺ appointed Kurzan bin Jabir Fihri as their leader. The Holy Prophet ﷺ sent them to pursue the enemy and also sent a tracker with them to follow their footprints. The Holy Prophet ﷺ prayed against these enemies, saying, "O Allah, blind their path and make it even tighter for them than the hide of a camel," meaning that they should not be able to travel further. Allah the Almighty caused their path to become blind to them, and they were caught the same day. When the day rose, they were brought before the Holy Prophet ﷺ. These 20 individuals captured and brought them. In one narration, it is mentioned that Kurz bin Jabir and his companions searched for them until nightfall. Thus they spent the night in Harra. Then morning came, but they did not know where the enemy had gone. Suddenly they saw a woman carrying a camel's shoulder. They captured her and asked, "What is this?" The woman replied, "I passed by a people who had slaughtered a camel, and they gave me this shoulder." and they are in this wilderness. They also gave her a piece of meat from the upper part of the leg, i.e., the thigh. She said, when you see them, you will notice smoke. Smoke will rise where they are seated. The companions departed and reached the group after they had finished eating. The companions asked for their surrender. All of them were captured, and not one of them remained. The companions tied them up, placed them on their horses behind them, and brought them to Medina. The Holy Prophet ﷺ was at a place called Raghaba. This was adjacent to Jurf, which is located 3 miles from Medina. Nonetheless, they took the captured to the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Hazrat Anas narrates that he, along with some boys, followed them until they reached the Holy Prophet ﷺ at a place where water flowed in the valley of Raghaba. Thus, the Holy Prophet ﷺ then ordered that iron rods be brought. They were heated. The Holy Prophet ﷺ passed these heated rods over their eyes because they had inflicted the same cruelty upon the Muslim shepherds. According to one narration, when they were brought before the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he ordered that one of their hands and the opposite foot be cut off, and their eyes be cauterized with the heated rods. They were left in the scorching sun until they perished. Another narration mentions that heated rods were passed over their eyes and they were left in the sun. They would ask for water, but they were not given any. Hazrat Anas states that I saw one of them licking the ground with his tongue due to extreme thirst, and also due to the heat, so that he could be cooled, until they all died. Their wounds were not cauterized to stop the bleeding, nor were they treated medically. Abu Kilaba narrates that these were the individuals who committed murder, theft, and apostatized after accepting Islam, and they waged war against Allah and His Messenger ﷺ. Ibn Sirin mentions that this incident of the Iraniyin occurred before the revelation of the injunctions regarding legal limits. Thus, this entire incident took place. It appears on the surface as if the Muslims committed great harshness. However, the Islamic injunctions were revealed later, which clarified the appropriate limits. Allah the Almighty revealed the verse, meaning the recompense of those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger and strive to create disorder in the land is only this, that they be slain or crucified, or their hands and their feet be cut off on alternate sides, or they be expelled from the land. That is a disgrace for them in this world, and for them in the hereafter is a great punishment. After this verse, the Holy Prophet ﷺ did not cauterize anyone's eyes, nor did he cut anyone's tongues, nor gave a harsher punishment than cutting off their arms and legs. And after this, he forbade mutilation to whatever army he would send. And after this, the Holy Prophet ﷺ encouraged charity and forbade mutilation. Muhammad bin Umar Waqidi and Ibn Sa'd narrate that they had stolen 15 camels from the fields. Nonetheless, they did this to the Muslims, so the punishment given to them was equivalent to their actions. However, afterwards, in accordance with Islamic law, such treatment was never repeated. Though this an answer, but a detailed response and a response to the allegations of some that why did we treat the enemies in such a cruel manner. Those who launch attacks on Islam do allege this. So Hazrat Mirza Bashir Ahmed Sahib has given an excellent answer to this in the Seal of the Prophets. He writes, "These were very threatening days for the Muslims because the whole land was ablaze with the fire of animosity inflamed by the Quraysh and the Jews. Moreover, according to their new policy, they had decided that instead of systematically attacking Medina, it should be harmed by secret methods. Furthermore, since deceit and treachery were inherent in the uncivilized tribes of Arabia, they were adamant in hurting the Muslims by any means possible. As such, the incident we are about to mention is but a link in this very nefarious chain of events, which came to an end in a terrible manner. The details are that in Shawwal 6 Hijri, a few men, which were 8 in number, from the tribes of Ukul and Urayna, came to Medina, and after expressing their love and affection towards Islam, became Muslim. After a stay of some sort, the climate of Medina affected their spleens and they suffered from a stomach virus. Using this as an excuse, they presented themselves before the Holy Prophet ﷺ. They presented their illness and said, "O Messenger of Allah, we are Bedouin people and have spent our time living with animals. We are not accustomed to the city life and therefore we have fallen ill." The Holy Prophet ﷺ responded, "If you feel ill in Medina, then go out of Medina and stay in the inhabitation of our cattle." He fulfilled the duty of hospitality and treated them with kindness. "And drink the milk of camels, etc. You shall become well by living there." In another narration, it is recorded that they themselves requested, "O Messenger of Allah, if you permit us, we would like to go outside of Medina where your cattle are situated." And the Holy Prophet ﷺ permitted them to do so. In any case, they sought permission of the Holy Prophet ﷺ and went to live in the pasture, which was inhabited by the camels of the Muslims. When these wretched people had set up camp and fully ascertained the state of affairs and had recovered their health after living in the open climate and drinking the milk of the camels, they suddenly attacked the shepherds of these camels one day and killed them. Moreover, in doing so, they were so cruel that first they slaughtered them like animals, and when there was still some life left in them, they pierced their tongues with sharp desert thorns, so that when they made a sound or tossed and turned in the agony of thirst, these thorns would add to their suffering. Then these barbarians did not suffice at this, but took hot matches and rubbed them into the eyes of the half-dead Muslims. In this manner, the innocent Muslims died, tossing and turning in an open field. Among them was a personal servant of the Holy Prophet ﷺ named Yasar, who was appointed to graze the camels of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. When these savages had killed the Muslims in this barbaric manner, they gathered all the camels and took them away. These events were reported to the Holy Prophet ﷺ by a shepherd who happened to escape to safety. The Holy Prophet ﷺ immediately prepared a party of 20 companions and sent them in pursuit. Although these people had already covered some ground, by God's grace, the Muslims swiftly pursued them and managed to capture them. The Muslims tied them in ropes and brought them back. Until that time, no injunctions had been revealed to the Holy Prophet ﷺ as to what should be done with an individual who commits such actions. Therefore, as per his old practice, that until a new injunction was revealed in Islam, the way of the people of the book was followed according to the Mosaic law. The Holy Prophet ﷺ ordered that just as these cruel people had treated the Muslim shepherds, they too should be treated in retribution and in equal retaliation. This was the teaching of Moses, and this was acted upon until a new injunction was revealed. In any case, this was done to serve as a lesson to others. Thus, almost in the same manner, these people were lowered into the pit of death in an open field outside Medina. However, God had decreed a different law for Islam. And so, from there on, even in a state of retribution and equal retaliation, the punishment of mutilation was forbidden. In other words, it was prohibited that a body of a criminal be disfigured in any way, or for body parts to be cut into pieces in a manner of retribution, etc. He further writes about this incident that we need not write extensively on this account, because the cruelty was instigated by the infidels towards the Muslims in this savage and barbaric manner without any just cause, purely out of animosity for Islam. Furthermore, whatever was done to them in punishment was merely in retribution and equitable retaliation. Moreover, it was done in such a state when the entire land was ablaze with a fire of enmity towards Islam. Then this decision was also in accordance to the Mosaic law. But even then, Islam did not uphold this law and prohibited such a course of action in the future. In such circumstances, no reasonable individual can raise an objection. On this occasion, it should also be remembered that these men had come to Medina with evil intentions in the first place. Furthermore, they were most probably trained by their tribe to live among the Muslims and injure them. Additionally, it is very plausible that they harbored an evil intention against the Holy Prophet ﷺ himself. But when they could find no opportunity in Medina, they proposed an undertaking outside the city. Their evil intention can also be gauged by the fact that the manner in which they dealt with the Muslim shepherds was not merely one of thieves and bandits. Rather, it was an act of utter revenge. If they had initially become Muslims pure-heartedly, and later on, after seeing the camels, their intentions had changed for the worse, then in such a case, what should have happened is that they should have taken these camels and ran off. If a shepherd had happened to become a hindrance, then at most they should have killed him and left. However, the manner in which they killed the Muslim shepherds and putting their own selves in danger by prolonging this act of butchery and torturing the Muslims evidently shows that this action was not the outcome of coincidental greed. Quite the contrary, it clearly possessed the character of animosity and was the result of heartfelt malice and long-standing rancor. In return for this ruthless action, whatever the Holy Prophet ﷺ did was merely in retribution and equitable retaliation, according to the Mosaic law, which existed prior to the revelation of Islamic teachings. However, shortly thereafter, Islamic injunctions were revealed, and such punishment was declared unlawful, even as an act of retribution. The words of Bukhari are, meaning that after this instance, the Holy Prophet ﷺ emphasized magnanimity and generosity and prohibited mutilating the body of enemies in all circumstances. Various Western research scholars, including William Muir, have objected, as per the habit, that the manner in which these murderous pillagers were killed was cruel and barbaric. However, if all the facts are analyzed in this case, the mantle of Islam remains absolutely untarnished. Actually, this was not the decision of Islam, but of Moses ﷺ, the law of whom the Christian Messiah did not abrogate, but upheld. Perhaps our opponents have the saying of the Christian Messiah in mind, that if someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also, and if someone wants to take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well, and if someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. If so, then verily our opposition has the right to raise this allegation. But the question is whether any reasonable individual considers this teaching at all practical. Furthermore, in the last 1950 years, has any Christian man, woman, or Christian community or government acted upon this teaching? Undoubtedly, this teaching is a wonderful one to stand up at the pulpit and exhort in sermons. However, in practical life, this teaching holds no weight whatsoever, nor can a rational individual be prepared to act upon it. Therefore, in such a case, to place these kinds of emotional models before oneself and make the Muslims the target of an allegation is but to furnish proof of one's own ignorance. Of course, look at the law of Moses, who, unlike Jesus, was a lawmaker and who understood the essence of the law. Alternatively, examine the practical conduct of the Christians and not just their claims. The truth shall become evident that pragmatically no religion can compare with Islam because it does as it claims. It does not have double standards, and its claims and actions are both so elevated that no reasonable and unprejudiced individual can object to it. Quite the contrary, one is inclined to praise Islam, for like the Mosaic law, it does not enjoin revenge in all circumstances and to wage the acts of retribution indiscriminately. Neither does it teach that punishment should never be administered, nor that when a criminal commits a crime, he should be supported and strengthened in his purpose by not punishing him in accordance to Christian law. Instead, Islam forsakes these two extremes and presents a moderate teaching, which is the basis of true peace in the world, which is that is, the punishment of an injury should be the like thereof and should be of equal intensity. However, if the circumstances are such as a probability of reformation exists by forgiveness or lenience, then forgiveness and lenience is the better course of action. Such an individual shall be deserving of a handsome reward from Allah. This is the teaching which Islam has presented in this regard, and no reasonable individual can deny that this is an unrivaled teaching which has taken into consideration all aspects of human need. Furthermore, even in the case of punishment, it has set the restriction that appropriate bounds should not be exceeded, and it has outrightly condemned the barbaric acts of mutilation. In comparison to this, despite the exemplary teaching of Jesus Christ, the actual behavior which Christians have shown towards their enemies and the atrocities which they have committed during wars are an open page in history, the repetition of which is not required here. I shall now mention another expedition, which is called the Expedition of the Qarad. There are differing opinions among historians and scholars of Hadith in relation to when it took place. Scholars of Hadith are of the opinion it took place after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah and before the Battle of Khaybar, between Dhul Qa'dah 6 Hijri and Muharram 7 Hijri. This is what the scholars of Hadith have settled on, whereas historians believe it happened after the expedition of Lihyan, i.e. the expedition which took place in Jamad al-Ula 6 Hijri. According to Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, the expedition of the Qarad took place 3 days before the Battle of Khaybar. Furthermore, they mentioned that it took place after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah and before the Battle of Khaybar. Allama Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani has written that the narration of Iyas bin Salama, which Imam Ahmad and Imam Muslim have related, supports the fact that this expedition took place 3 days before the Battle of Khaybar. In the narration, Hazrat Salama bin Aqwa has mentioned the Treaty of Hudaybiyah first, then the incident of the Qarad. In the end, he mentioned that we returned to Medina thereafter and remained in Medina for 3 days before departing towards Khaybar. Conversely, the historians Allama ibn Ishaq and Ibn Sa'd have stated that the expedition of the Qarad took place in 6 Hijri prior to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Hazrat Mirza Bashir Ahmed Sahib has not fully analyzed this. However, where he wrote the headings in the latter part of his book, he has mentioned that the expedition of the Qarad took place before the Battle of Khaybar in Muharram 7 Hijri. The expedition of the Qarad is also known as the expedition of the Ghaba because the she camels of the Holy Prophet ﷺ would graze there. Ghaba was a field 4 miles from Medina in the direction of Syria, behind the Uhud mountain. It is called the expedition of the Qarad because the Holy Prophet ﷺ pursued Uyayna bin Hisn until the Qarad, after he had attacked and stolen the Holy Prophet's she camels. The Qarad is a spring approximately 12 miles from Medina. The details of this are as follows. The Holy Prophet ﷺ had 20 milch camels and some other camels which would graze in the fields of Bayda in the direction of Khaybar from Medina, and from Bayda to the opposite mountain. A year of drought struck that place, and so they were brought towards Ghaba. A shepherd would go every day after Maghrib to milk them and bring them back to the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Uyayna bin Hisn Fazari, along with 40 riders of the Ghatafan tribe, attacked them and stole the camels. According to one narration, their leader was Uyayna's son, Abdul Rahman, whilst Uyayna was present in a location further back to support them. During the attack, the enemies killed the son of Abu Dhar, who was the shepherd of the camels, and they took Abu Dhar's wife, Layla, as a captive. Even though the wife of Abu Dhar's son was also there, she managed to save herself from the enemy. Who was Uyayna bin Hisn? It is recorded in relation to him that he was the chieftain of the Banu Fazara tribe on the occasion of the Battle of the Confederates. During the Battle of the Confederates, when 3 battalions of the enemy joined with the Banu Qurayza with the intention of launching a fierce attack on Medina, Uyayna was the commander of one of those battalions. After the conquest of Makkah, Uyayna bin Hisn accepted Islam. According to one narration, Uyayna accepted Islam prior to the conquest of Makkah and even participated in it. He also participated in the battles of Hunayn and Taif. The Holy Prophet ﷺ sent him along with 50 riders to punish the Banu Tamim tribe. There were no Muhajir or Ansar companions with him. The cause for this expedition was that the Banu Tamim tribe prevented the arms collector of the Holy Prophet ﷺ from taking the arms. Then, in the era of the Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, Uyayna also fell prey to the sedition of apostasy, and he joined with Tulayha when he claimed prophethood. At first, he became a Muslim, but then became an apostate and pledged allegiance to Tulayha. He was later taken captive to Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, and he granted him a favor and released him. He therefore re-accepted Islam. His standard of faith wavered here and there. It is mentioned in a narration that the Holy Prophet ﷺ refrained Hazrat Abu Dhar Ghafari radiallahu anhu from going to Ghaba. But despite the warning of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, Hazrat Abu Dhar Ghafari radiallahu anhu went to Ghaba anyway. The details of this are recorded that prior to Uyayna's attack, Hazrat Abu Dhar sought permission from the Holy Prophet ﷺ to go to the grazing grounds of his she camels. The Holy Prophet ﷺ replied, "I fear for you lest the enemy attacks you from that direction, for we are not secure from Uyayna and his allies, and this place is also in that direction." Hazrat Abu Dhar insisted, but the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, "I fear that they may kill your son and take your wife as captive, and you will return with the support of a staff." Hazrat Abu Dhar states, "How peculiar is my case that the Holy Prophet ﷺ was stating that he feared for me, and I was insisting. And by God, it transpired exactly as the Holy Prophet ﷺ had stated. I was home when the she camels of the Holy Prophet ﷺ had already been brought back to the ranch. They had been provided to drink, i.e., they were given water and food, and they had been milked. Then we went to sleep, and during the night, Uyayna attacked us with 40 riders. They stopped and called out. So my son went out, and they killed him. In relation to this, there is mention of Salama bin Aqwa going out in pursuit of the enemy. It is mentioned in Sahih Bukhari that Salama bin Aqwa narrates, "Once I departed before the first adhan of the Fajr prayer. The she-camels of Allah's Messenger ﷺ used to graze at a place called Dhikarat. A servant of the Holy Prophet ﷺ named Riba was also with Hazrat Salama." He continues, "A servant of Abdurrahman bin Auf met me and said the she-camels of Allah's messengers had been taken away by force. I asked who had taken them. He replied, the people of Ghatfan. Hazrat Salama then said, I made 3 loud cries to the people of Medina, saying, O Sabaha. These are words expressed at a time of danger. He continues, I made the people of Medina hear me. He cried out loud so that they would reach there. His voice was very loud. He then sent Riba to inform the Holy Prophet ﷺ. He then says, Then I rushed onward and caught up with the robbers while they were watering the camels. I started throwing arrows at them as I was a good archer. And I was saying, I am the son of Al-Aqwa, and today the wicked people will perish. He went out alone to confront them. I kept on saying that. When I would be in the trees, I would shoot arrows at them. And when narrow valleys came, I would climb the mountain and throw rocks at them until I was able to retrieve all of the she-camels from them. In Sahih Muslim, the following words are recorded. I would pursue them in this manner until there was no she-camel of the Holy Prophet ﷺ which I left behind. I also took 30 sheets from them, which they dropped to lighten their loads whilst fleeing. I would place a rock upon whatever they discarded so that the Holy Prophet ﷺ and his companions could identify the trail. I continued to pursue them and kept shooting arrows at them. He engaged with them single-handedly. According to historical accounts and at the beginning of other narrations, it is stated that not all the camels were retrieved. Some camels were successfully taken away by the enemy. On the other hand, when the news of this incident reached the Holy Prophet ﷺ, an announcement was made in Medina declaring a time of danger. A call was raised. Meaning, O horsemen of Allah, ride forth. Immediately, horsemen began gathering around the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Hazrat Miqdad was the first to arrive, followed by Hazrat Abad bin Bishr, Saad bin Zayd, Usaid bin Hudayr, Ukasha, Muhriz bin Nazla, Abu Qatada, and Abu Ayyash. The Holy Prophet ﷺ appointed Hazrat Saad bin Zayd as the commander and instructed, Go forth in pursuit of the enemy. I will join you with the others. The Holy Prophet ﷺ told him to proceed and that he would join him afterwards. The Holy Prophet ﷺ then proceeded with a contingent of 500 companions, though some narrations mention the number as 700. He appointed Hazrat Ibn Maktoum as his deputy in Medina and left Hazrat Saad bin Ubadah with 300 companions to protect the city. The Holy Prophet ﷺ tied a flag to the spear of Hazrat Miqdad bin Aswad. An incident from this campaign is mentioned as follows. Ibn Ishaq narrates that the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, O Abu Ayyash, why don't you give your horse to someone who is a better rider than you, so that they may pursue the enemy? Hazrat Abu Ayyash replied, O Messenger of Allah ﷺ, I am the best rider. He says, after saying this, I spurred my horse forward, but it threw me to the ground after just 50 yards. I was astonished that the Holy Prophet ﷺ had been saying that I should give the horse to a more experienced rider, while I said that I was the most experienced rider. Then the Holy Prophet ﷺ gave his horse to Hazrat Muaz bin Mais. Hazrat Salama, who was in pursuit of the enemy, narrates that as the day progressed, the leader of the enemy, Uyayna, arrived to assist his men. This shows that Uyayna was present there himself and was in a narrow mountain pass. He says, I climbed a hill, and Uyayna asked his companions, who is this? They replied, this is the one who has been chasing us since morning, shooting arrows at us and reclaiming the stolen animals. He has taken all of our belongings. Uyayna remarked, if he was not certain that others were following him, he would have left you alone by now. He was intelligent and told them that another army was on its way. He said to his companions, a few of you should go to him. Hence, 4 of them came to me and climbed the hill. I asked them if they knew me, to which they asked, who are you? I replied, I am Ibn Aqwa. By the one who honored the Holy Prophet ﷺ, none of you can capture me, and if I pursue anyone, they cannot escape me. One of them said, indeed, I also feel the same way, and they retreated out of fear. This is a narration from Sahih al-Bukhari. Hazrat Salama further narrates, I remained there until I saw the horseman dispatched by the Holy Prophet ﷺ prior to his own departure, emerging from among the trees. Leading them was Muhriz bin Nazla, followed by Akhram Asadi, then Abu Qatada Ansari, and finally Miqdad bin Aswad. I took hold of the reins of Akhram's horse, saying, O Akhram, beware of them, lest they kill you. He should not go forth, but should wait until the Holy Prophet ﷺ and his companions arrive. He replied, O Salama, if you believe in Allah and the last day, and you know that paradise is true and hell is true, then do not come between me and martyrdom. He spoke with great courage. Upon this, he let him go. Akhram and Abdurrahman bin Uyayna then came face to face. He injured both Abdurrahman and his horse, but ultimately Abdurrahman struck him with a spear and made him a martyr. Abdurrahman then took Akhram's horse and fled. Another narration states that Hazrat Akhram was martyred by Obar, who was accompanied by his son on the same camel. Hazrat Ukasha killed both of them with a single attack of his spear. Yet another account attributes Hazrat Akhram's martyrdom to Mas'ada. There is also mention of a dream about the incident of this martyrdom. A day before fighting against the enemy, Akhram had seen a dream in which the heavens opened for him, and he ascended through the skies until he reached the 7th heaven, and then reached the highest stage of connection with God. He was told, this is your destination. When he shared this dream with Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he said, may your martyrdom be blessed. He was martyred a day later. Hazrat Abu Qatada arrived after Hazrat Muhriz, and this horseman of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, Hazrat Abu Qatada, engaged in combat with Abdurrahman bin Uyayna. They began jousting. During the fight, Uyayna's son severed the legs of Abu Qatada's horse. Despite this, Hazrat Abu Qatada killed him and mounted his enemy's horse. There is also mention of Hazrat Abu Qatada's battle with Mas'ada Fazari. According to one narration, when Hazrat Abu Qatada learned about the enemy's attack, the Holy Prophet ﷺ set out from Medina along with his companions towards Zubab, which is a small black mountain along the route of Mount Uhud when coming from Thaniyatul Wada. Abu Qatada went to him And the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, O Abu Qatada, go forth and Allah will help you. Hazrat Abu Qatada says that he set out accompanied by one other person and they swiftly reached the enemy. Abu Qatada's companion said, What do you think, Abu Qatada? We do not have the strength to fight them. His companion said that they did not have the might to fight against them. He said, Are you saying that I should wait until the Holy Prophet ﷺ? In other words, that he should wait for the reinforcement of the entire army rather than just two waging an attack. Abu Qatada says, I said that I wished for him to attack from one side and I would attack from the other. Then the two launched an attack and created difficulty for the enemy. The enemy shot arrows at them, as a result of which one arrow struck him in the forehead. Hazrat Abu Qatada says, I pulled the arrow out and it felt as if I had taken out a piece of iron. I pressed forward and a swift horseman came before me who donned armor. He recognized me, but I did not recognize him. He said, O Abu Qatada, Allah has caused you and I to meet. He removed the armor from his face and he turned out to be Mas'ada Fazari. He said, What do you prefer? A sword fight? Jousting? How would you like to fight? Do you want to use swords, spears, or do you prefer to wrestle? I said it was up to him and that he could choose whatever he liked. He said, Then wrestling it is. These were the unique ways of warfare at the time. He dismounted his animal, as did I. I tied my horse to a tree and also left my weapons there, and he followed suit. Then we began fighting, and Allah granted me victory over him. I was on top of him, and I intended to get up, take my sword, and he too should get his. We were between the two armies, and therefore any one of us could have been attacked. Something hit my head, and we reached the weapons of Masada whilst fighting. I extended my hand and took hold of his sword. When he saw me holding his sword in hand, he said, O Abu Qatada, spare me. I said, No, now you shall find your resting place to be hell, and then killed him. I wrapped him in my sheet and wore his clothes myself and took his weapons. I rode on his horse because when we were fighting, my horse had ran towards the enemy and they hamstrung it. I quickly continued onwards and took hold of Masada's nephew, who had another 17 horsemen with him. I indicated to them and they waited. Then, when I got close to them, I attacked them and I struck Masada's nephew with a spear and broke his neck. His comrades fled and I took possession of the camels which the enemy had left at the time of the attack of Hazrat Salma bin Aqwa. There are remaining details regarding this battle which will
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر